Golden State Media Concepts Sci-Fi Podcast. Together we dive into the world of sci-fi and science fiction. From episodes of Star Trek, Star Wars, to The Walking Dead, Resident Evil, all the hot new science fiction movies from the back doors of Marvel or DC. The Golden State Media Concepts Sci-Fi Podcast. You'll never look at science fiction the same way again.
Thank you for tuning in to the GSMC Sci-Fi Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Leah Naomi. I got a great show for you today. We're going to talk about Lost in Space, the movie Ad Astra, and we're going to go into some Rick and Morty goodies. So hopefully you'll enjoy. First, we're going to dive right into Lost in Space. I'm sure you're all aware that Lost in Space has had a few iterations. There was a movie, there was an old show, and then now there's a revamp show, which is available on Netflix. I'm going to start out by talking about the new show. So, Lost in Space, the new version, got a 7.2 out of 10 on IMDb. It got 71% on Rotten Tomatoes. And 94% of Google users say that they like the show. I started watching it recently. I have had it on my queue in Netflix since the show first dropped, but I just hadn't got around to watching it. So I just binged season 1, and then on Christmas Eve, season 2 dropped as well. So I'm all caught up now. I'm really excited about this show. From the first episode, I put it on and I immediately got drawn into the story, the characters, everything. Now, I've seen the original show and I've also watched the movie. I do enjoy the movie. It's sort of a guilty pleasure. I find it to be really fun. It's certainly not my favorite by any means, but I can definitely enjoy it for what it is. But this show is way better than that. They did a really great job of capturing the spirit of what has already existed for the Lost in Space franchise and really making it current and updated. The casting is really well done. Yeah, it's just a really great show. Officially, the description of the show: Danger, Will Robinson. The rest of the Robinson clan should be on the lookout for danger as well, because they are facing challenging times. It's 30 years in the future, and the family has chosen to start a new life on a space colony. On their way to what they believe will be a better world, the Robinsons' ship is abruptly thrown off course, and they are thrown into a dangerous alien environment. Now, light years from their original destination, they must forge new alliances and work together to survive. Stranded with the Robinsons are unsettlingly charismatic Dr. Smith and inadvertently charming Dawn West, two outsiders who are thrown together by circumstance and a mutual knack for deception. That's a really great description of the show. Of course, the Danger, Will Robinson line comes from, that beloved robot from the original series. The way that they work the robot into this new series, I feel like it's absolute genius. It's very smart writing. Will and his family are stranded on this planet because we don't know why in the very beginning. One of the family members is in danger, and so Will and his father go off to find some minerals that can help save one of the family members, one of the sisters. And Will, of course, gets lost. And the dad has no choice but to go back and save his daughter because Will can wait. So while Will is on his own in an alien world, he runs into a robot. And without realizing he's going to do it, he saves the robot's life. The robot's able to heal itself because of the acts of Will. And from that point on, that robot is absolutely loyal to Will, but also connected to him on a deeper way. And as the season and as the series progresses, we start to see that the connection between Will and this particular robot goes deeper than we could have imagined. In this series, Dr. Smith is played by Parker Posey. I think that she does such a phenomenal job in this particular role. She really captures that, like, you want to like her character, you want to believe that she's going to be a good person, but you also know that she's spouting lies left and right. It's very uncomfortable to watch. The way that she captures the energy of this particular character is fabulous. It was perfectly written for Parker Posey, so good job to her for that. The rest of the family is really well cast as well. Penny is my favorite character on the show. The writing for her is sharp and witty and clever, and I absolutely love her. When I look at her, sometimes I think of Sansa from Game of Thrones. No, she's not the same actress, but there's just something about her that girl has some power, let me tell you. Anyway, really great performances there. Everybody else in the show is also well cast, well acted. The fight to survive on this particular series is definitely episodic, like something new comes along every episode. Very similar to the original series, actually. I guess that's the way you propel forward a story like this. But the way that it's done and the money that's put into it, the CGI is great. The costumes are amazing. And the sets are cool. Like, it's really believable. You want to be there. I want to go and experience these worlds that are obviously not safe at all. But I'd like to go. And that's really well done on the part of the makers of this show. When we transition from season 1 into season 2, things really get flipped upside down on their head, and we go on an adventure actually in space instead of just on one planet. I feel like the first season would be better named Lost on a Planet. Of course, they don't know where that planet is within space, so I guess it's fair. But when we transition to the second season, we really do get a little more of the Lost in Space aspect. We also run into a lot more characters. They get reunited with more people from the main ship, the Resolute. That's the ship that's supposed to be taking all of these colonists to the new planet. And of course, the Robinsons are not the only ones that are lost in space. There's a lot of other families out there. And in season 2, we get to know some of those families a little bit more than we did in the first season. I really like how the second season lets us really get to know the whole family, and we follow all of the characters on their different journeys. And it ended on a cliffhanger. Let me tell you, I cannot wait for season 3, and season 2 just dropped, so it's going to be a long year. I think that I'm probably going to go back and watch the campy movie and maybe rewatch the original series as well, just to pass some of the time. Alright, so that's what I got for Lost in Space. We're going to go to a break. When we come back, we're going to talk about what to watch if you're done with Lost in Space.
Want to find out what movies to go see? Then check out the GSMC Movie Podcast. It's your ticket to the latest movies, whether it's a new blockbuster event, romantic, comedy, or action flick. This show has got it all covered. They talk some what to go see now, don't bother, what's hot on Netflix, and everything in between. That's gsmcpodcast.com/movie-podcast. When it's all about the movies, it has to be this new show. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit gsmcpodcast.com for more info.
Alright, welcome back. So, before I talk about what to watch when you're done with Lost in Space, I want to talk about the original series. First of all, the ratings for that show are pretty good as well. It gets a 7.2 out of 10 on IMDb, and 91% of Google users like that show, which is pretty awesome. There are some differences between the two shows. The original premise of this show was the Robinson family was supposed to set off on a 5-year mission to explore a distant planet, but an act of sabotage by the scheming Dr. Zachary Smith, who managed to get himself trapped aboard the spaceship, leaves them adrift in space for 3 years. The Robinsons, pilot Don West, Dr. Smith, and their trusty robot move from planet to planet, always searching for a way to return to Earth. So the setup of that show was definitely based on fears that were more current to the time. That show did air originally in 1965. So it makes sense that, the idea of getting lost out in space and not being able to return home, that's a real thing, especially as space missions were trying to take off and people were dying in explosions instead of actually getting to space and back. So those are real fears that definitely show up in the overall premise of that show. Whereas now, in the new Lost in Space, the idea is that our planet is spoiled and we need a new place to go. And I think that definitely reflects the fears and the current state of affairs in our world today. In the newer show, there's a meteor, or called the Christmas star, that crashes on Earth and causes damage, but there's already been enough damage that it can't really be repaired, so they go looking for somewhere else. In contrast, the original show, which was considered a comedy, was more about, foiling plots and trying to get home and all of that. Very episodic. So, where this particular, the newer version, has more of an overarching story to it, which I prefer, actually. When we're looking at the movie Lost in Space, the movie came out in 1998. It is considered an action-adventure. I definitely find it more of a comedy. The ratings for this particular movie are pretty laughable. It got a 5.2 out of 10 on IMDb, 28% on Rotten Tomatoes, and only 83% of Google users like the movie. Now, like I said, I do enjoy this movie. It is sort of a guilty pleasure of mine. I have seen it many times. I remember seeing it in the theater when it first came out. It's just great mindless action, but it is funny to me. Matt LeBlanc's character is really difficult to take seriously, but that could be because I grew up watching him on the show Friends as Joey, and so going from being Joey from Friends to playing Major Don West, pilot, that it was hard to transition for me. Gary Oldman does an absolute fabulous job as Dr. Zachary Smith in the movie. Gary Oldman is great in everything that he does, though. He really transforms himself for his roles, and while this is certainly not my favorite movie that he's in, he just was born to be a bad guy, wasn't he? Like, he's just the supervillain. You could throw him in any villainous role, and I will absolutely believe immediately that, you know, he is that character. You try to put him in a good role, though, where he's like the savior. I'm not going for it. I don't believe it. But in this particular movie, it's supposed to be a fast and furious space adventure in which a dying Earth depends on one all-American family for its salvation. On their way to colonize a new world, the family run into some unexpected problems. Soon they find themselves lost in space with little more than a psychotic villain and a variety of unwholesome aliens for company. Now, the way that it's done in the new Lost in Space show, I think, is a lot more believable than in this movie. You know, like, why would Earth pick this particular family, first of all, to go and colonize a new planet? That's kind of weird, if that's your only hope. In the show, they are the 25th batch of colonists getting sent over to this new world, and so there's definitely an established world there, and they just happen to be characters along the way, so there is that. But overall, the Lost in Space movies, shows, whatever, I love it. I mean, who doesn't want to go out and discover space and figure out what's out there? You know, that's why No Man's Sky is such a fun game. I love that video game. It reminds me of being lost in space. You know, I'm by myself and I crash on a planet and I get to discover what there is and gather resources and figure out how to get off the planet and go to the next thing. It's cool. It's fun. So there's that. If you like Lost in Space, there's all kinds of fun outer space type movies. Of course, Star Trek, any of the Star Trek movies or shows, I would highly recommend. Interstellar was pretty good. Red Planet, I love. There's just a lot of really good stuff out there. All right, well, we're going to go to another break. When we come back, we're going to talk about the movie Ad Astra.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
Welcome back. We just wrapped up talking about Lost in Space, and now we're moving forward talking about Ad Astra. So Ad Astra is a movie I watched this last weekend. It stars Brad Pitt. It's slated as a drama mystery. It's about a guy who's on a journey out in space. It's really interesting, the story overall. IMDb gave this movie a 6.7 out of 10. Rotten Tomatoes gave it an 84%. And 59% of Google users liked this movie. So the description says, 30 years ago, Clifford McBride led a voyage into deep space, but the ship and crew were never heard from again. Now his son, a fearless astronaut, must embark on a daring mission to Neptune to uncover the truth about his missing father and a mysterious power surge that threatens the stability of the universe. So this movie opens up with Brad Pitt dangling off of some kind of structure that looks like it's in space. But there also appears to be gravity, which is really strange. It's not until some more time passes and you get a better view of what's really happening that you see that this structure, you're not actually in outer space, you're just really high in the atmosphere of Earth, I guess is how they're playing it. So from the start, this movie kind of broke my believability. Then as the movie goes on, there are these power surges that cause issues with some of the space missions and things that are happening near Earth. And everybody, for some reason, decides to blame Brad Pitt's father, who's played by Tommy Lee Jones. He went on a mission a long time ago, and he disappeared somewhere near Neptune. He was on a mission to find life in space. And as he passed each planet, he determined there was no life there and then went on to the next one and then eventually lost contact. The way that they set it up, it's like this guy just disappears out in space, but now they're blaming him for these power surges. They're saying that something about his spaceship is breaking down in atmosphere and is causing power surges. But also, we find out as the movie goes on, there have been these weird transmissions from the father that he may not have been as innocent and kind and heroic as we thought. So their answer to this problem is to bring his son, who Tommy Lee Jones's character has not seen since, I think it's been like 20 years or something. Brad Pitt comes in to kind of appeal to his father's sensibilities and get him to stop sending flares to Earth. In order to do that, he has to travel to the moon and then to Mars. So, it's interesting. This strange sort of journey that Brad Pitt's character goes on. There's a lot of like cryptic, like, your father isn't who you think he is type of stuff, but we don't get a lot of insight into that. Meanwhile, Brad Pitt's character, the psychology there is fascinating. He's just weird. He doesn't seem to connect to anybody. He chooses his mission above all other things. It seems really empty. I think he's going for like a tortured soul type of vibe, but really I just got like a little bit of a sociopath type of thing. Like, I don't care about, I'm completely unconnected to the rest of humanity. And okay, if that's what you're going for. So Brad Pitt goes on this journey. When they're on the moon, I think the best scene in the whole movie happens on the moon. There's a little chase scene. It's all downhill from there. It really is. And I kept thinking, when we get towards the end, is this movie going to turn into Contact, where like you travel all through space and you go through all these things just to meet your father and you've really learned nothing and then you just come back? I'm not going to tell you how it ends because, no spoilers, but this just was not my favorite movie. I feel like I'll never get that time back. And that's a shame because I've got a lot of other stuff that I want to watch. It looked so promising though. I feel like everything that was going to be good about this movie was in the previews. And that's that. There really is nothing else cool to say about it. If you are looking for a great space adventure, there are so many others out there. Don't watch Ad Astra. Don't do it. It's not good. really, at its core, Ad Astra is a father-son type of movie. I guess there's some daddy issues going on there and a yearning for a relationship or connection of some kind. If that's what you want, I would recommend watching something more like Frequency, which does a lot better job of connecting the emotional side of a father-son relationship. I mean, really, honestly, to that point, if that's what you're looking for, watch Avengers Endgame, because that's way better. And it's Avengers, so there's that. There are some amazing scenes where Tony Stark gets to connect with parts of his father, and if you want that, like, wholesome, I'm gonna wrap up all my feelings with a nice little bow type of a movie, watch Avengers. Watch anything else. Don't watch Ad Astra. That movie was just not good. Anyway, we're gonna take a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to talk about Rick and Morty. Woohoo! We're about to get swifty.
Watching TV has changed over time. Streaming has become the new norm. That's why Golden State Media Concepts television podcast dives headfirst to the world of cord cutting. Want to be on the loop of what's hot in Netflix? Or if it's not a preference, what about original shows in Hulu? We've got you covered. Join us as we fill in the blank and talk about movies to stream and what show you should be binging. This is the Golden State Media Concepts television podcast.
Welcome back. We just wrapped up talking about the awful movie Ad Astra. Now we're going to talk about Rick and Morty. So, Rick and Morty is one of my favorite TV shows. There's currently 4 seasons. The newest episodes are so great. My whole family looks forward to watching the episodes each week. I have 4 kids, and all of us enjoy this particular show. It's definitely a comedy with sci-fi vibes. IMDb gave it a 9.3 out of 10. Rotten Tomatoes gave it a 95%, and 97% of Google users like this show. The official description is, after having been missing for nearly 20 years, Rick Sanchez suddenly arrives at daughter Beth's doorstep to move in with her and her family. Although Beth welcomes Rick into her home, her husband Jerry isn't as happy about the family reunion. Jerry is concerned about Rick, a sociopathic scientist, using the garage as his personal laboratory. In the lab, Rick works on a number of sci-fi gadgets, some of which could be considered dangerous, but that's not all Rick does that Jerry is concerned about. He also goes on adventures across the universe that often involve his grandchildren, Morty and Summer. So, this show is absolutely hilarious. The science in this show is really funny, and Rick is such a great character. He knows that he is the smartest person in the universe. This particular show acknowledges the multiverse. One of the things that I really, really enjoy about the Rick and Morty universe is that when something happens in one season, it carries over into the next season, so they're acknowledging the things that have happened before. So, for instance, something happens that causes the sidewalk and driveway to crack, and in all of the seasons since then, there's a crack in the driveway. I love that attention to detail, and if you look at the art that's on the walls inside the family's home, you can see that there's acknowledgement to previous seasons and characters that we've met along the way. Rick and Morty is so much fun. It spreads out into everything. Going to Comic-Con, lots of people are cosplaying Rick and Morty. It's just such a culturally, like, pop culture relevant show. It's so much fun to watch. And the episodes are short. You know, it's a 30-minute cartoon, but it certainly doesn't feel like it. I personally have had to invest in many of the keychains and toys and things for my children and for myself, not gonna lie. One of my daughters, her name is Penelope, but we call her Pepper. And for her birthday one year, we had a caricature artist that we are friends with, characters by Steve, draw my daughter as Pickle Rick. So it's Pickle Pep, because we call her Pepper. That image is still hanging on her wall in her room years later. We have a giant portal painted on one of the walls in our hallway. It's a thing in our house, so we're definitely really big fans. If you have not watched Rick and Morty, you absolutely need to go and watch it. Learn all about all the funny little worlds and how clever really the writing is. It's good stuff. Alright guys, well that wraps up what I've got for you today. Thank you so much for listening to the GSMC Sci-Fi Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'd like to ask that you please remember to subscribe to the show, write us a review, it really helps us out. Please follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Thank you so much, and feel free to get swifty.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Sci-Fi Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.